We're going to begin. We're going to begin, folks. And the first thing I want to say to everyone is greetings and welcome. Welcome to today's UC Berkeley Center for Studies in Higher Education webinar. I am Margaret Heisel, a research associate with CSHE and webinar moderator. Now, our webinar from the center today will focus on the relationship between the college and university goals of baccalaureate learning and today's graduate employment. Certainly, the college and university curriculum has been very valued in our communities, but some changes have taken place recently in the employment of graduates, which we're going to discuss. Preparation for employment has certainly been one of the goals of higher education, but it's just one of many goals, but a significant one. We also, of course, must focus on those other goals. Now, today, the format of today's webinar features first two very well recognized experts on this subject, discussing their research and also drawing upon their very high level of knowledge regarding assessment of student learning, which obviously is very important in this issue. During the last section of the webinar, they will respond to questions you have given us as you registered for the webinar, and we will also welcome any questions you wish to place on the chat function of your screen during the time that the speakers are presenting. Now, discussing who our speakers are, we will hear today from Tara Rose, who is Director of Assessment at Louisiana State University. Dr. Rose also served as Senior Fellow with the American Association of Colleges and Universities, AAC&U, of course, where she was instrumental in the creation of the multi-state collaborative for learning outcomes assessment. Now, that was a 13-state collaborative that used the value rubrics as a shared standard to establish direct evidence of the quality of student learning, to strengthen both state and national policy discussion of the issue. We are also hearing today from Teresa Flateby, who was the Associate Vice Chancellor of Institutional Effectiveness at Georgia Southern University, where she was responsible for developing and facilitating centralized assessment and institutional effectiveness processes that were subsequently embedded in every single unit of the university. So, and I just want to mention that both of these speakers have served as faculty as well as administrators in higher education and are very learned. And now I turn to them. Tara and Teresa, please begin.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, and welcome everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we will get started.
Okay.
All right, hopefully everybody can see my screen. Thumbs up. All right, well, thank you for attending today's session where Terry and I will share some insight on employers' perceptions of the AAC&U essential learning outcomes. If you're not familiar with AAC&U or the essential learning outcomes, hopefully you will be by the end of our webinar. So I also will I already provided 2 links in the chat. Those links are the outcomes, the website for the outcomes themselves, and then also access to the value rubrics as well. So in your own time after the session, you can copy those links down. So as we make our way through the presentation, I want to ask you to think about a few questions. So the first question is, are your students ready for the workforce, and how would you know? The second question I want you to consider is, what skills are important to employers, and do they mirror what you think the institution values? And then the third question I want you to consider throughout the webinar is, are employers aware of different frameworks institutions are using to build curriculum and evaluate learning on your campuses? So with that in mind, I want to talk a little bit about learning frameworks and employability frameworks. So according to NALOA, the definition of learning frameworks are tools that specify learning outcomes or competencies that define, classify, and recognize education, learner, military, and industry expectations. So I've given you a few examples of some learning frameworks over here on the right. You probably have heard about the degree qualifications profile. Obviously, we are here today to talk about the AAC&U essential learning outcomes and the value rubrics. And then also another learning framework would be the high impact practices framework. Now, there are many more. There is also a handout that we will make sure to give you all, but it discusses the learning frameworks and the employability frameworks and some links that will take you to those websites. In terms of the employability frameworks, I would argue that the definition of learning frameworks applies to the employability frameworks, right? It should be the same definition. And so a few of the employability frameworks that I just wanted to share with you all, so you are aware of those, are the employability skills framework, the essential employability qualities, the EEQs, the main organization hosting that one is QA Commons, if you all haven't heard about that. We have the NACE competencies, which are very familiar. Many institutions use the NACE competency framework. And then we have the Cambridge Employability Skills Framework. So again, lots of learning frameworks, and I'm just kind of going to go backwards. So lots of learning frameworks here, and then employability frameworks. So which framework is the best for your institution, right? So I want to ask you all, what learning and or employability frameworks does your institution use? If you all can quickly jot down some frameworks that you all use in the chat, and we will pause here for a minute. So NACE, we have the value rubrics. Okay, so we have somebody who's already familiar with AAC&U value rubrics. That's great. So specifically 2 of the value rubrics, global learning and intercultural. That's fantastic. And I am going to, let's see here. I think somebody tried to get into the webinar. I'm not sure if Helen can ensure that they are admitted. So I want to talk a little bit about the AAC&U value rubrics. So I have used the AAC&U value rubrics for over 8 years now, right? And so lots of institutions, I even worked at the state level. And again, we use the value rubrics at the state level, assessing our general education for all institutions in the state of Kentucky, actually. So a lot of experience with AAC&U rubrics. So with that said, there's a lot of others who also have experience with AAC&U rubrics, and I want to share with you some of those numbers. So did you know that there have been over 122,000 clicks just on the value rubrics site alone for AAC&U? The individual rubrics have been downloaded over 735,000 times, and these numbers are to date. 2,879 colleges and universities are actually using these rubrics across 154 countries. And I literally just found this out today, which is pretty exciting to me. But in terms of different languages, the rubrics are in 6 different languages, and they're actually working on a 7th. So this is pretty exciting. So knowing all of this, I kind of had like an illuminating epiphany, right? I was like, if there are this many institutions downloading and using these rubrics, which means there are thousands and thousands of faculty using these rubrics to assess classroom assignments, right? And that's how they're evaluating, are our students competent in certain learning outcomes? Do employers know this? Are they aware of the learning frameworks and or employability frameworks that the institutions and faculty are actually using, right? And so hence, this is kind of where the project started, right? Terry and I got together, we were thinking about what can we do? Are institutions and employers on the same page, right? How do employers or do employers define critical thinking the exact same way as faculty? I mean, how many of you all have been in a meeting and you're talking about defining civic engagement or global learning or critical thinking, and faculty don't always see eye to eye, right? And so if we as faculty can't see eye to eye on defining things at our institution, how can we expect employers to be on the exact same page that we are, right? And so this is kind of why Terry and I went down, towards our research path that we did. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Terry and she can start us off.
Thank you, Tara. I'm going to talk a little bit about the actual study we conducted and how it differs from some of the other ones that have been conducted over time. So we also were interested in making sure that our students, our graduates, were not only ready for employment, but they had advancement potential. And we thought these LEAP essential learning outcomes would be really important to explore in terms of, do they resonate with employers as well as with us? And so there was a current research focus. It's been going on for a number of years, but the focus from AAC&U sponsored research and NACE sponsored research is primarily the perceptions of executives and hiring managers that complete the surveys. They're usually surveys. They focus on career readiness. They focus on skills and abilities. So we were thinking that, well, executives may or may not be the ones who are actually the employers who are actually working with our graduates or recent graduates, particularly. And hiring managers sometimes work with the graduates and the alumni, and sometimes they don't. Oftentimes they don't. So we thought, let's talk to the folks, the employers who are actually working with our graduates. So what we did was we refocused the study to what are called line managers, and those are the managers who work directly with these graduates. We wanted to change some of the methods. We wanted deeper, more richer information. And so we decided we would conduct focus groups. We thought that way we could get additional information you really can't if you're just completing a survey. And as I indicated, we were interested in career readiness and advancement, but we were still going to focus on these LEAP essential learning outcomes because we thought that they were very important to employers as well. And then finally, we were hoping to provide some instructional strategies or assistance for faculty who might want to have more authentic assignments that students could apply while they are with us. So could you advance, please? So these are the essential learning outcomes we addressed. It's not all of them, it's the majority of them, but we selected these because we thought they applied both to employers as well as faculty and higher education institutions. So that's why we selected this list. I'm not going to read that, you can read it quickly. So, but they're the overarching outcomes that are very important to both groups. They're ubiquitous almost. So we wanted to positively impact the readiness and advancement potential. We wanted to identify similarities and differences between the two groups. Are there any? What are they? We were thinking, as Tara indicated earlier, there's a lot of discussion about the definitions of certain outcomes within the institution. So we thought surely there were going to be lots of differences that we would find with employers. So we also wanted to strengthen and clarify communication relationships with employers and faculty, particularly higher ed, but faculty in particular, because we want to work together. We think that that's very important to ready our graduates. So we gathered information from our line managers, and line managers are really difficult to identify if you've been in higher ed for basically your whole life. So we were fortunate enough to have a colleague that we worked closely with that was the Career and Professional Development Center director at an institution, a pretty prominent institution. He had been in various types of industry his entire life. And then just for 5 years, he became the director. He knew many of these line managers in various walks of professions. And so he was instrumental in getting us the focus group participants. So we had the first focus group, we sent the invitation to, they accepted. We organized the first focus group, but before we conducted that, we sent out just the listing of the AAC&U essential learning outcomes, just the listing, no definitions, nothing else. And we asked them to rank those in order of preference, or not preference, but importance to them. We received that. And then just before we conducted the first focus group, we sent them the definitions from AAC&U of each one of these outcomes. So we discussed any differences, we discussed the interpretations or the definitions, and if there were any differences in the first focus group. And then we asked the focus group members to re-rank the AAC&U essential learning outcomes. There was almost no difference between the first and second. And it's interesting because it's consistent with what we value in higher ed. We decided we needed another focus group because we wanted additional information. We just hadn't gathered enough information. So we sent out was sort of a questionnaire, but it really was just an email with very specific questions. And we asked them for the top ranked skills, which ones were the weakest. We identified 6, and then they responded to the weaknesses, or maybe there weren't any, and they indicated that. So we gathered all of that information before we had the second group and used that as a jumping off point for a discussion. And so we had already collected some rich information, but during the focus groups, we got even more information in the second one because we had them discuss primarily 2, the most important and the weakest. And those turned out to be critical thinking and effective written communication. Next,
So
please.
Terry, before you go on, I just want to share with the audience some of the industries that participated in these focus groups.
Yes,
so the industries represented were beverage, manufacturing, computer, hardware, software, financial services, higher education, investment banking, investment management, medical technology, oil and gas, and professional services. So just wanted to put that out there. A good diverse representation of industries that participated in these focus groups. So
thank you, Tara. Yeah. So we then compared our results with the results of the AAC&U most recent survey conducted in 21. And you can see there is a lot of overlap between the survey, AAC&U survey, and then our 2 focus group major groups, and there were a lot of inconsistencies. Our groups thought that the oral communication was very important. It's not mentioned in the survey, but integrative learning is not mentioned in the AAC or in our information, but it was in the survey, and I'll talk about that in just a few minutes. But we decided that we were consistent, pretty much. Critical thinking, problem solving, teamwork, inquiry and analysis, written communication, all important. So the top 6 skills we use are basically right here. So yeah. Next,
The
please.
weakest skills were oral communication and creative thinking.
Yes.
No.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. So I was going to mention that in these slides, but yes, the most important but one of the weakest was critical thinking, problem solving quotes. So I'm not going to read each one of these verbatim, but critical thinking is something that needs to be learned and practiced. That's important. To me, it's the number one thing that is not taught enough in universities. They're not saying we don't teach it. It's not practiced enough. That's the bottom line. And the newer employees seem to want to respond like they think that employers want them to respond. That causes a bit of discomfort with the employers, because they're looking really for fresh ideas often. And also they said that employees don't always think through why something is a problem, and they prioritize speed over accuracy. That is a problem for them, and miss the bigger picture, another problem. And they're too quick to finish. Don't consider the wider consequences. There is a lot of information packed into that particular quote. I think we could pay close attention to that. And then critical thinking is the foundation level of problem solving. If that foundation is not strong or missing, then problem solving by default is a weakness. So they squarely think that critical thinking is essential, as do our faculty members. Next, please. Written communication is another top skill, but weak. As a matter of fact, some said it was the biggest weakness. Part of the problem is that new graduates are so casual. They write as though they're texting. That is obviously a problem, depending especially on the kind of company or corporation that the students or the graduates are working in. They also don't teach these skills and expect them to be present. We found that these employers often had flatter organizations than they used to. It's not as hierarchical as it used to be. And so that flatness makes them improve, or I should say, impact the readiness level they expect. They also don't have an audience awareness. That's one of the critical pieces. My research background is in critical thinking and written communication. And those have been issues for decades, and they continue to be issues. And they struggle to construct clear and concise arguments. Again, it is connected to the critical thinking outcome as well. So we have a number of things we could be working on. Next, please. Okay, so these are just some examples of ideas. They're not really completed thoughts, but they're ideas for you to ponder. So authentic assignments, more or less simulations. We think it's important that we try to reach out and work with employers at some level. I have found great success working with the career and professional development directors on campuses. Often they are very eager to help. Some of these have backgrounds in industry, so they have a good idea of what is expected. Others are able to reach out to their employers and try to elicit some of this information and willingness. So sharing these assignments, trying to get ideas from employers, what they would like, and then crafting that so it's more or less authentic to what they can expect. So they have an opportunity to try to transfer what they are learning in their programs to careers. We think that the transfer is incredibly important, and having that experience is important. Transfer does not happen as readily as we think it does. And then just appreciate and encourage this partnership, if you will, or collaboration. The design of the assignments too, make sure that the students that you have understand that this needs to take place in a thoughtful way, that they're just not getting through the assignment. They don't wait until the last minutes because they need to be thoughtful about it, and taking their time to really understand what is being asked and what the implications are. Another thing that we might suggest is scaffolding assignments, many assignments that lead to something bigger. Sometimes we have assignments that also basically replicate mini internships. So you can also promote it in that way as well. The credible evidence. They need practice in identifying and using credible evidence for whatever purpose it's being used for. And practice is important for that. They can discuss it, but they may be more assignments along those lines. And then audience awareness, of course, as we've indicated, is incredibly important. What does the audience need? How do you present something to the audience? How is it different from your boss or somebody in the field? It depends upon the audience, and giving them an opportunity while they are with you to explore different audiences is important, because as we all know, once students leave, unless they're going on to graduate school, they're not going to be writing to instructors anymore. So you're probably already doing these things, but these are just reinforcers of possibly what you're doing. And now, Tara, back to you.
Thanks, Terry. So Terry went over the top 6 skills listed that the employers ranked as the top 6. I'm going to talk a little bit about the bottom, right? The bottom half of the essential learning outcomes. So I think what was most perplexing to us was kind of those bottom for all 3 groups, was a few of the bottom skills, specifically foundation and skills for lifelong learning ranked pretty low. Intercultural knowledge and competence ranked low, and global learning, and then quantitative literacy. So those kind of 4 skills tended to rank lower than the others. And so I think we found that interesting, considering a lot of our institutions are really focused on intercultural knowledge and competence and global learning. We're doing a lot of initiatives and projects in those areas. And so we were kind of confused as to why that ranked so low. When we asked the employers why that was, their response was they didn't expect a student to be proficient in those outcomes as a recent graduate. Those skills are something that will be learned throughout the advancement of their time being employed. So it was not an expectation for a student to have those skills automatically coming out of college, that those skills could be taught. We asked them specifically about why quantitative literacy was ranked kind of low, or in at least the bottom half. And then there was talk about how they thought that some of the definitions of the outcomes kind of overlapped. So when they thought quantitative literacy, in their mind, they were thinking problem solving. And so whereas you saw problem solving ranked pretty high. Right. And so again, it's the overlap, and it's really defining that definition of what quantitative literacy means in terms of the definition for employers. So those are some of the bottom skills that I wanted to share with you all. So now I want to ask you, this group, in the Q&A or in the, the chat function, what skills do you think are missing? So we went through the top 6, we went through the bottom 6. What skills are missing for you all? If you could take a minute and write some skills in the chat. Don't be shy. What's a missing skill?
In your view?
In your view. Look at some of these essential skills that we have here. And then of course, the top skills were written communication, critical thinking, right? Problem solving. So when we asked employers what skills they thought were missing, this is what they had to tell us. They said, in terms of importance, teamwork. Yes, teamwork is a great one. Michael, thank you. The employers and the focus groups mentioned attention to detail. Recent graduates do not have attention to detail.
Right.
Digital literacy, they felt was missing from our list of outcomes that we shared with them to rank.
Yeah.
They talked about humility a lot. That actually came up in both focus groups. Humility, taking initiative, professionalism, taking risks, and the willingness to be able to fail, right? So these are some skills, what some may call soft skills, right? Those cognitive type skills, but that were missing. And then when we went back to the AAC&U survey that was conducted in 2021, you'll see here that some of the other skills, in addition to the ones that we aligned with for our focus group, they also mentioned drive and work ethic. Right? The ability to take initiative was ranked at 63%, self-confidence, leadership, and then empathy. So these are some of the skills that employers thought our research or our study was kind of missing. I will say while I'm on this slide that the AAC&U survey, the last time it was conducted was 2021. They're actually in the process of conducting it now. So the results should be out later this year. So you will have that.
I'd like to mention something too regarding initiative. They said that they often come, the new graduates often come expecting to be told what to do, how to go through a problem solving process or whatever it is. And they just don't seem to understand that they have to take the initiative at times. So.
So Terry, I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Okay. We also asked them if they had any additional comments they wanted to make. And a number of them said, why were there so many outcomes? They also believe that some of the outcomes could be subsumed under the something else. For example, problem solving, maybe under critical thinking. Now, I personally think that might be too much within a particular outcome. It would be confusing, but that's me. So I think having those two separate is important. But there's some thought we could give to this. They did not believe that intercultural knowledge and competence is specific enough to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So they thought that needed to be changed because it didn't speak to them the way it's defined. Oral communication, there were in the AAC&U information, it says a part of it is to be able to demonstrate a prepared, purposeful presentation. And they said, well, that is important. It's equally important to be able to talk to people individually. So there are different kind of oral skills, oral communication skills that really are not included in the AAC&U definitions and rubrics. But they adamantly emphasized the importance of critical thinking to success at their institution, their places of employment. That is essential.
So that's kind of our study. And I wanted to share with you all some supporting data that kind of aligns with some of the results that we found in our study. Specifically, I want to talk about a few recent studies. Obviously, there are previous studies that have been done in previous years, but I want to talk a little bit about the 2023 job outlook from NACE, and then the 2023 job skills study that was conducted by Coursera. So for the job outlook by NACE, you'll see here that this is the list of what was asked is, again, employers were asked to rank the top skills and then also rank how proficient recent graduates are. And so you'll see here, there is a big gap in the top two outcomes, right? So you see communication, the importance for employers is 95.6%. And then, but students graduating and coming out of college, recent graduates, their proficiency ranks at about a 46.9%. Big gap still remaining in communication. Again, we also see a huge gap in critical thinking, and this is 2023 data, right? So 94.4% of importance for critical thinking, students are proficient 55.9%. Okay, the only career competency that ranked higher, that students ranked higher on, was technology, which kind of makes sense, right? I mean, we're kind of moving to this digital technological world, and students are pretty proficient when it comes to technology. They're all on, they all have social media, they all have iPads, phones, so forth. So it's just, it's a skill that students graduating just know, right? And so that's the one skill that students seem to be very proficient at as compared to the importance by employers. I will say really quick, I'm going to go back. The 2022 data outlook, communication and critical thinking were flipped. So critical thinking last year in 2022 was top, and communication was second. This year they flipped. Communication ranks higher than critical thinking in 2023. Okay. Now these are attributes that employers would like to see on a candidate's resume. Right? So if a hiring manager is looking at a resume, these are the skills that they're kind of looking for, right? And so those top skills, you have problem solving, ability to work in a team. Somebody in the chat mentioned teamwork as an essential skill. Absolutely. You have analytical and quantitative skills. Communication is on here, both written and oral. So you can kind of see where the data overlaps with some of the research that we found, right, in our study, the findings that we found in our study. Again, strong work ethic. I think that was one of the missing skills that we found in our study, right? We didn't have that included as it's not an essential learning outcome, but in both the focus groups and the AAC&U employer survey, work ethic was absolutely mentioned as a top important skill that they would like to see in their graduates. So in terms of Coursera did a study looking at the fastest growing ranked growing skills for digital and human skills. So when you think about digital skills, and this is over 4 million users that sign up for Coursera, right? So lots of users. And so they're not surveying anybody particular, but they're surveying those who took certain courses, right, in Coursera. And so when you think about digital skills, you have a list of 10 here. So the top fastest growing digital skills for 2023 is Scrum software development. Second is data visualization. The rank change is how much this has increased since last year, right? Huge jump. So you can see that these are the fastest growing skills in 2023. Data visualization is a huge one right now. In terms of human skills, the top skill that's changing is storytelling. It's actually interesting. Terry and I just got back from a conference, and the whole conference was themed around storytelling, right? How do you tell a story to the appropriate audience, right? In a way that is meaningful and can be understood. So these are some of the fastest growing digital and human skills for 2023. And this is, again, is from the Coursera data. And Terry?
I'm going to jump backwards and forward at the same time. I'm returning back to our study, but I'm talking about how it has changed since we started this project. Because of several reasons, which are basically changes in our scheduling, but also we had feedback from the focus group participants that suggested it might be beneficial for you to reach out to individual institutions and assist them, because all of our needs will be slightly different. So I took the study a little bit in a different direction. We both are working on this together, but we wanted to still focus on essential learning outcomes. However, because it's at the institutional level, we wanted to be able for them to give us feedback on what they wanted to discuss. I am currently working with two institutions. Both are very different. One is a private, and the private institution has a lot of students who go on to graduate school. And they told me that there are those students that they have that are not in a delineated career path, but they wanted to help them be ready for careers, but also for advancement. So we're working with them on that primarily because there is a need with their institution. And we are also working with the institution and faculty, either from employer feedback or some other way that they want to partner with the employers. And so to address the important but weak skills, just like we have been doing. But as I said, we have two projects in progress. It's a little bit slow in the summertime for various reasons, but you could imagine the major ones. So, but we are working with them. We continue to work with them. So this is kind of exciting. Again, there are two different approaches, and we can work with others as well.
So remember at the beginning of the webinar, I asked this group to think about kind of those three questions, right? Are your students ready for the workforce, and how would you know? What skills are important to employers, and do they mirror what your institution values? And then kind of what learning and employability frameworks has your institution chosen, right, to build that curriculum and learning experience? And so for institutions, I'd like for you all to consider three things: planning, teaching and learning, and then assessing, right? When you think about these larger, more global questions, right, about your institution. So in terms of planning, and if you're thinking about trying to, make the connection of what students are learning at your institutions and what employers want, we really encourage you to plan and do, right? So thinking about what would you like to achieve and accomplish at your institution. Again, just like Terry mentioned, all institutions are not the same. Your missions are not the same. And so really thinking about what is your institutional's mission and what is it that you need to achieve or want to achieve and want to accomplish. And then thinking about who are all your stakeholders, right? How are you going to build those partnerships and collaborations with all your stakeholders, right? And this is degree program faculty, you have career centers, you have the employees, you have those people, your institutions who are over your data, right? So data stewards, you need lots of help, right? You need a large group of stakeholders who are willing to take this forward with you. Consider strategies that you can use to increase your communication and transparency on campus. And then thinking about, are those stakeholders on the same page, right? So we kind of talked about What is it that your institutions value, and do employers value the same thing? And if they do, are you defining those things in the exact same way? Right. So thinking about that, having that discussion with employers or your stakeholders, are you all on the same page? If you're not on the same page, it's going to be very hard for institutions to move forward. Right. So we got to get everybody on the same page. Teaching and learning. Think about what learning frameworks or employability frameworks your institution is using or considering, and why are you considering those specific frameworks, right? What is it about those frameworks that you think work best for your institution? Consider ways that your institution can encourage teaching skills such as those as critical thinking and written communication across the entire curriculum at scale, right? So we know faculty are doing great things in a course, great things in a degree program, but how can we do these things at scale, right? So really getting institutions to think much bigger and much larger. And then again, consider those curriculum co-curricular activities, right? I mentioned earlier that one framework was the HIPS, right? So high impact practices. How can you bring in those curricular and non-curricular co-curricular activities, internships, right? So thinking about some of those things as you're connecting with your employers. And then of course, assessing, because that is what Terry and I love to do. But thinking about assessing, right? What do people really and truly care about? What is the impact to the students, whatever it is you're doing? Thinking about that impact. What is the impact to students? What is the impact to faculty? And what is the impact to your community, right? And how would you know? How do you know that you're making impact, right? Thinking about those things. Are stakeholders involved in reviewing and providing feedback? Are you bringing them to the table? Are you bringing employers to the table when you're thinking about developing or redesigning your curriculum, right? For your programs, are employers at the table? And then thinking about how will data be used, right? So if you're going to collect data, you're going to assess all of this, how are you going to use it to truly make evidence-based decision-making at your institutions, okay? And I'm going to stop there and ask if there are any questions. I'm going to pull up the chat or Q&A. Let's see what kind of questions we have. May you say more about, Terry, you can let me know if you want to take this one. May you say more about how you selected and categorized the skills / sub skills for the essential learning outcomes that we selected?
Well, we basically just looked at the overlap between the two that we thought were consistent with both employers and higher education personnel, people in higher ed. I'm not. I don't know, Tara. Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I would say that. So the AAC&U essential learning outcomes, there are 16. And we only chose not to pick 3 of those. So we chose 13 out of the 16. And we didn't choose 3 specific ones. And I'd have to go back to my notes, but one of those was we didn't choose civic engagement. We didn't choose teamwork, and we didn't choose information literacy. And honestly, I don't know why. We just thought that the other 13 were more known on campus or institutions across the nation, more so than the 3 that we didn't choose.
Right. And while teamwork is important, they were also talking about how, at least with the focus group participants we had, that they were pretty comfortable with teamwork, that the graduates were. So, yeah.
So another question. Faculty have different attitudes toward a career-oriented college education. Some are fully on board, while others see it as reducing a liberal education to careerism. Does your research offer ideas or strategies for addressing these differences?
Well, one thing I think we can do is emphasize the overlap and how some of these really important skills that we teach, like critical thinking and problem solving, are as equally important to employers. And I think if we try reaching out to employers, getting their feedback and participating or collaborating with them, we will know that it's not just reducing something to the least common denominator. I know that's not what you said, and it's not what everyone thinks, but it's kind of that idea. We want them to use the skills they are learning in the programs but transfer them to other places as well. So they're more agile thinkers.
Another question. How big was your focus group? So our focus group, Terry, feel free to chime in. So again, focus groups need to be small, otherwise they wouldn't constitute as a focus group. So we did do 2 focus groups, and I would say we were right at 20 total.
And we had
between both focus groups.
Right, and we had 2 for each one. So we were able to gather additional information. And so the qualitative data that we did collect was very rich. Although we changed the focus, we had to change the focus for various reasons. But one of those reasons was the impact or the input that we had from the focus group participants.
I have a question. My question is, have you done any research that distinguished among students who graduate in different majors? I saw that students graduating with any of the STEM majors seem to be highly employable.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why one of the institutions I'm working with wanted to address the students who are not in these more the trajectory was not the same for them. They not toward a particular type of career, but that was more nebulous. For example, some of the humanities, of course, and some of the social sciences. They knew that that was an issue in this particular institution, and they wanted to address that. So in the work that we're doing now, we're letting the institution help impact or focus what they want to work on, because they know the issues they have, and they identified what you're talking about as an issue.
Another question was, what ideas might you have for developing student storytelling skills? I'll chime in first, Terry, and then you can take it. I would go back to the foundation of critical thinking. Paul Edler, he has a great book out on critical thinking, but encouraging students to really think about when they're trying to tell a story, for them to kind of, at the conference last week, we also learned we need to be able to state what we're saying. We need to be able to explain, elaborate, and then illustrate, right? So going back to those critical thinking foundational skills, it's actually called CI, SEE-I, but it's having students state, explain, elaborate, and then illustrate what they're trying to say or what story they're trying to tell. Terry, anything to add to that?
I was just going to say too, the addressing an audience is probably important with storytelling. Who is the audience to whom you're telling the story? That would help frame the story as well.
Yes.
Yes. So.
All right. Any other questions? Feel free to highlight them in the chat. But I do want to leave you all with some references. So Terry and I do have 2 kind of published articles talking about kind of our research. I also put on here the link to the 2023 NACE Job Outlook survey information, and then the Coursera job skills report. And then I have provided Margaret the learning and employability handout, where it provides you the frameworks and links to those framework kind of websites for references. So.
And I would like to invite you, if you have questions after the fact, sometimes you think about, oh, I wish I'd asked that. Please feel free to reach out to us. I think you can get our information through Margaret. Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, one of your questions that came up I noticed on the screen was someone asking if you would define digital literacy, which was seen as an important skill.
Yeah, I would go back to, and I'm going to pull it back up here. Thinking about digital literacy, I think when you're thinking about the definition of literacy, it's very generic. It's very broad because digital literacy incorporates so much. But when you think about what digital literacy is, I think it's kind of everything that you see here under the digital skills, right? It's all these things.
Yes.
Yes.
That's important. That's important.
I think data, data visualization is a big one in terms of digital literacy and the ability to communicate your story right through data visualization.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, this piece really helps with defining that. That's excellent definition.
And it's almost like a data, it's a communication skill, right? It's digital communication.
We are coming to the end of our hour, as you probably know. But as you mentioned, if there are questions that any listeners have that they want, just send it to me. And I will see that Teresa and Tara receive them and can respond. And thank you both for a very, very informative webinar. Thank you, because it's also one that's very important to the field. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having us. We really enjoyed it.
Yes,
well, thank you for accepting our invitation. Bye-bye.
Certainly.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.